So there's a good chance, right, if you're watching this video, you have heard before this quote, chess is 99% tactics, or something of that nature, right? And to be honest, I don't really 100% agree with this, but regardless, we can't debate the fact that tactics, they're important, and if you want to get better at chess, well, if you completely neglect your tactics, it's going to be tough. So in this video, I really wanted to dedicate this to talking about 3 common tactics training mistakes that I see a lot of people making, especially when I start working with new students. I'm often surprised how many have basically no real structure to the way they work on tactics, and they just sort of like go about it very randomly. But of course, it's better if ahead of time you sort of have a clear idea of what it is that you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish. So the first thing is just using like random online puzzles. For example, like this could be the puzzles on Lichess or chess.com. Chess Tempo is a little bit better, but still can kind of fall into that bucket. And so there are 2 main reasons, I would say. The first one does not apply to Chess Tempo, but it definitely applies to chess.com and Lichess, which is that the large majority of the problems are basically computer generated, and the quality, in my opinion, isn't that great, especially as you get higher up in tactics rating. A lot of the solutions can start to feel a bit kind of like weird, and like I know there are some people that like that, but personally I've just never been a big fan. And the other thing is that there's often, because it's just like a random set of puzzles and you can be given like any puzzle within a certain range, there's no real focus on any particular like tactical pattern or tactical motif. And maybe there are some cases where that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think in terms of becoming like tactically proficient and really building up your pattern recognition to like a high level, this probably isn't ideal. So one thing I would recommend, and this is something that my old coach, Grandmaster Max Illingworth from Australia, he recommended to me when I was younger, and also some other people online like from Chess Dojo, Kostya Kavutskiy. I think I've heard him recommend this as well, and it's this app called CT Art 4.0, and I've used this myself, and I like the app in the way it's sort of structured, where it's like, okay, you can sort the puzzles by rating if you want and work through them like that, but you also have the choice to sort them by theme, and that way it basically allows you to go through a lot of puzzles with the same tactical motif at once. Whereas like, let's say you have 50 puzzles with like the theme of like an overloaded piece or something like that. I can't remember if that's actually in the app, but I assume it is somewhere. Well, if you solve like 1,000 puzzles online, you might get 50 with that pattern, right? But because it's going to be so dispersed across a period of time, it's not going to get ingrained into your brain as well, compared to if you just did 50 at once with that same tactical pattern. It's going to really be banged into your head a lot more effectively, I believe, if you do it with this method. One thing I will say about this app though, it is paid. It's only like $10 or something like that, so it's not that much money, but you know, I think it's a good app. I'm not being sponsored or any crap to say this, but... And also one other thing I'd just like to say about this app, my former coach Max, I remember him telling me something to the effect of like him basically speed running the app, doing like the thousands of, maybe it's even more than like 10,000 puzzles in the whole app, like right before a tournament, and it had some of the best tournaments ever off the back of doing that. So like, yeah, that's a bit extreme obviously, but even stronger players can definitely benefit from this. So yeah, highly recommend checking this out. The second thing is not calculating from the initial position whenever you're doing like a tactical puzzle, or even like more of like a deeper calculation. Tactics and calculation, they're often conflated as being the same thing, but when I think of tactics work, I think more of like using something like CT Art 4.0, trying to drill in pattern recognition, whereas tactics is more like, calculation rather, often involves looking a little bit deeper and is not just trying to look for like a singular execution of like one pattern. It's often like combining several different things, but this applies to both regardless. So I just want to say this is like one of the worst things you can do on your tactics training that will really negatively impact the way that you actually play in real games. Because in a real game, right, it's like you can't just play a few moves on the board, realize that like, oh, this line doesn't work, and then like ask your opponent for forgiveness and to like take it back. Like they're probably going to say like, no, screw you, right? And online puzzles again sort of make this habit worse for a lot of people, because like you'll play one move, the computer will give you like this instant hit of dopamine, like, oh, you found the right move, but you might not have found the whole line yet. So it doesn't matter if you found the right move if you didn't see the justification behind it. Not to mention, often when you find a like solution, there's often more than one line that you need to see to actually justify playing that. Sometimes on chess.com, for example, or a lot of tactics trainers, the way they work is like you play one move, they throw one move back, but that probably wasn't going to be the only move you had to calculate. You probably had to calculate like 2 or 3 different choices that they could have gone for and see what to do against all of those. And that's where I recommend maybe using, for example, like a tactics book where you might even like get out a real board, you set the position up, you don't move anything around, then you check the solution, and then you're like, okay, so I saw this line, this line, this line, solution mentions this line, this line, this line, oh, and also that other line that I didn't look at. In my opinion, you learn a lot more from that than just like, even if you found the right solution in like one of these online puzzles, it's not going to tell you like all the different lines that were necessary to calculate, right? And I think if you are serious about improving this area of your game, this is definitely something you should consider. Maybe getting a book like the Woodpecker Method, for example, is a pretty good place to start. I've talked to a lot of people who, for example, have said like, this book got me to like 1500 USCF or like 1800, something like that. And yeah, I actually used it myself as well a couple years ago. Definitely good for a variety of players, even if you're more on the rating spectrum. But okay, just taking a quick pause for a second. I want to put this position on the screen right now, and I want to challenge you guys to actually calculate a little bit. We're going to come back to this at the end of the video. If you've been a long time viewer, you might remember this position from a video I made last year, but anyway, take a pause of the video and we'll come back, look at what you said later, and this will tie into this point as a bit of a hint. But anyways, the third and final mistake we're going to discuss is you probably just aren't doing tactics consistently enough. And I know there are going to be some of you guys watching who are like actually really hard working, you're like doing this crap every day, but a lot of people, like I would say most, even myself a lot of the times, I'm definitely not perfect. Like, we tend towards being more lazy, right? I feel like that's just a part of the human condition. But a lot of people might like do like 1 day a week of something for like an hour, and then they don't see any results and they're like, oh, this doesn't work. And it's like, well, because you did it like 1 day a week for 1 hour. Like, what did you expect was going to happen, right? It's like if you go into the gym for like 15 minutes and do like 1 set of bicep curls and expect to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? It's just not going to happen. But what I will say on this ride again is that this slightly contradicts what I've been talking about earlier in this video, but I'd rather someone do like 7 days a week of like 20 minutes a day of tactics and doing it the wrong way, rather than someone who does it the correct way for like 1 day a week and they try to like get every little detail perfect, right? Because while it is a pretty cliche thing to say, at the end of the day, if you're not like consistent, well, it's tough to expect results. But anyways, revisiting this position, I hope you guys had a good think about this. So probably you were very tempted to calculate bishop takes g6. This is a very forcing move, and it's one of the first moves you should consider. Like, you should always be looking at the checks, captures, and threats, of course, in any position like this if you're trying to calculate out something very forcing. And there are 2 sort of main things that you need to calculate when looking at this, and already this is going to be where a lot of people go wrong, where when they calculate this, they're only going to be considering f takes g6 as a response from black. And well, if you calculated this, you would hopefully see that this is completely winning. After rook takes d4, you're attacking the queen, and you also have rook h4, almost checkmate threats coming up. They probably have to give the queen up for that. So f takes g6 is quite easily winning for white. The slightly more difficult line to see, which a lot of people might just overlook, is bishop takes f3. And it's important to, again, not just, as I said, like play bishop takes g6 and then like your opponent plays bishop takes f3 and you're like, oh my god, I didn't consider that, right? Like, you want to see this in advance from this position so that like when this happens, you don't like start freaking out and throwing a fit at the board. So from this position, it's important to also see that after g takes f3, of course, if queen takes, then the queen gets deflected away and like you're down a piece now. It's all for nothing. G takes f3. Takes is not the best move for black. Instead, they can play queen to g5, force a queen trade. And actually, if you paid close attention to the starting position, white was actually down a pawn because we sacrificed one a few moves earlier in exchange for this sort of dangerous looking attack. So this is not really a position that you want to be going into. The attack is very much being killed off at this point. So the correct idea, though, hopefully you saw this ahead of time, is to play bishop takes f7 double check. If the king goes to like h8, which it did in the game, queen takes f3, they can try to like do this pin, but then e6, and like, okay, this is what happened. And then like at the end of all this, white's up a pawn, and in addition to that, the black king's very weak, so this is just a winning position for white. But also, quite importantly, if they go, let's say after bishop takes f7 check, king takes f7, this is the most principled response, e6 check, and notice how the king's cut off this way. If you go like king to g6, there might be some like queen g6 here, and then like rook takes d4, or maybe e7 at some point. If king e7 immediately, you can also go for that. Queen h4, king d6, e7 also works, or maybe rook takes d4 there as well. Many good moves, but evidently in all the lines, yeah, white is just completely winning. And this is a good illustration of what I mean, right, when I say like calculate all the moves from the starting position. And also, quite importantly, considering all of the opponent's responses. And of course, you're not always going to be perfect. You're going to miss some stuff. That's just inevitable. But again, in a real game, you're much less likely to overlook something like bishop takes f3 and also see the correct follow-up after that if you make sure to follow the practices that I've talked about in this video and do them in your training. But anyways, that's going to be it for this video. If you found it useful, please leave a like, subscribe. If you want more help with your game with one-on-one coaching, there's a form in the description below. But anyways, that's going to be it for this video.